Hello, I'm Esther Giduyot. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Can Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy persuade U.S. President Donald Trump to provide U.S. backing for Ukraine's security against any future Russian aggression? As the Sudan war escalates, the United Nations Human Rights Chief warns of the risk of starvation for Sudanese people. And in our entertainment report, celebrating music legend Roberta Flack, will recap her career from childhood to stardom. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on Friday in an effort to persuade Trump to provide some form of U.S. backing for Ukraine's security against any future Russian aggression. Zelenskyy is expected to sign a landmark economic agreement with the U.S. aimed at financing the reconstruction of war-damaged Ukraine. Meanwhile, President Trump hosted British Prime Minister Keir Starmer Thursday at the White House, and VOA White House correspondent Anita Powell has more on that story.
U.S. President Donald Trump and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the leaders of two nations that formed a special relationship while pushing Nazis and fascists off the battlefields of World War II, met Thursday at the White House to discuss the looming threat 8 decades later of war in Europe as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine enters a 4th year. Trump emphasized his condition for supporting Ukraine. On Friday, he said he will host Ukraine's president to lay out a preliminary deal that gives the U.S. a share of the nation's critical raw materials.
The American taxpayers will now effectively be reimbursed for the money and hundreds of billions of dollars poured into helping Ukraine defend itself, which by and of itself is a very worthy thing to do.
Starmer said the pair discussed a plan for peace that is tough but fair and backed by strength to deter future Russian aggression. He also said he was ready to put boots on the ground and planes in the air to support a deal. And in answer to Trump's demand that NATO members boost defense spending to 5% of GDP, Starmer said he agreed Europe had to step up. Earlier in the week, he announced an unexpected increase that still falls far short of Trump's benchmark. He also set his conditions for a fair settlement.
It can't be peace that rewards the aggressor or that gives encouragement to regimes like Iran. We agree history must be on the side of the peacemaker, not the invader. So the stakes, they couldn't be higher, and we're determined to work together to deliver a good deal.
Unity is key, analysts say, but there will be challenges.
The most important thing, do these guys get along? Do they have a common vision? Can they maintain some sense of common purpose? Can they avoid the kind of divisive rhetoric that President Trump used a lot last week when he was so pejorative towards President Zelenskyy of Ukraine? And can we begin to see a Western strategy really emerging that all major countries in NATO can agree to?
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin, who spent his day at the Kremlin hosting a high-ranking North Korean delegation, rejects the idea of peacekeepers in Ukraine. South Korea's spy agency reported Thursday that Pyongyang appears to have sent additional troops to assist Russia on Ukraine's battlefields. Putin said Thursday that there is a mutual readiness for Moscow and Washington to further cooperate after Trump recently reached out directly. He also blamed Western elites for trying to disrupt the blossoming relationship. Trump has said they will meet in Saudi Arabia, but has set no date. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
Now, for more on the Trump-Zelenskyy meeting, let's go to VOA Ukrainian reporter Ostap Yarish at the White House. Ostap, give us some of the details about today's critical meeting between the two presidents.
Hello, just moments ago, Ukrainian president arrived here in the White House to meet Donald Trump, and we know that right now they are having a meeting at the Oval Office to discuss one of the most important deals maybe for Ukraine and the United States this year and the years that were before. It's a deal, rare earth deal, that will lay the framework for future cooperation between the United States and Ukraine in this regard. Of course, the Ukrainian president and American president will discuss future security guarantees. Ukraine says that it needs those guarantees either from the United States or from European partners, better both, to secure that the peace is lasting, that it's not going to be broken in a year or two or ever, for that matter. So Ukraine needs those guarantees from its partners. We expect that that's going to be one of the topics that the presidents will discuss. Later on, we expect them to sign this agreement. It's a question what's going to be in that deal. We know that the American president wants, as he says, to get money back that the United States spent to support Ukraine. Ukraine says, on the other hand, that this aid, this assistance that came under the Biden administration, that it was not alone, that it was vetted by Congress, by the previous administration, and they want to secure the future cooperation, not repay for the previous aid. We'll see maybe future remarks from the presidents and how will that play on.
Well, Ostap, definitely a very significant meeting today, but what are Ukrainians back home expecting the president to take back to them?
Well, first, Ukrainians expect that nothing should be decided about Ukraine without Ukraine. They expect to have fair deal. They expect to have some reassurance from the United States on how the policy or cooperation will look forward. So they very much look forward to hearing what President Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy gonna tell them after the press conference. So first, of course, they expect to have fair deal, and they are looking forward to have some either security guarantees or reassurance from the United States that the aid, primarily military aid, will continue. We don't know if that's gonna be the case. Again, looking forward to hearing what the presidents will tell us.
Ostap, very, very quickly, what is the reaction of Ukrainians on the deal about the rare earth minerals between the United States and Ukraine?
Before the first version of the deal, we didn't see very much positive reaction. But now that we have a new version, new variant of that deal, the reaction is more positive. Again, people are waiting to see the final text. So, but now that there's this variant, I think there are more positive reactions to that.
Great reporting. Ostap, thank you very much. That was excellent reporting indeed. VOA's Ostap Yarish at the White House. Anticipation is growing in Russia for yet to be scheduled summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Jonathan Spear narrates this report.
The Russian leadership pays tribute to those who have died in these 3 years of full-scale war in Ukraine. Now entering its 4th year, Russia still calls it a special military operation, and they're marking it with events including an exhibit of portraits of the fallen. But it's the anticipation of a face-to-face meeting between Trump and Putin that's dominating the conversation on the streets of Moscow. Maxim Ilyanov is among the artists taking part in the memorial portrait exhibit. He sees Trump's approach as transactional and a positive thing.
Trump always says, let's make a deal. It's a business position, and those who make deals do not waste advantages, but they seek to acquire. One can negotiate with him, but he wants money, not bullets.
Relations between Moscow and Washington hit a low point due to then-President Joe Biden's political and military support for Ukraine. Trump's promises to end the war and invitation to Russia, but not Ukraine, at peace negotiations has sparked enthusiasm here for a reset. But that enthusiasm is tempered by some voices calling for lowered expectations.
We remember Trump's first presidency when, in general, massive sanctions began to be imposed against our country as never before. Increased arms supplies to Ukraine began. Much was done to worsen the situation around the Ukrainian crisis and in relations between Moscow and Washington at that time.
Russians who oppose their country's invasion of Ukraine have been silenced in Russia or forced into exile. They see Trump's proposed negotiations as a de facto political and military victory for Putin.
Russia would really like to have working relations with the United States, provided that Russian interests will be taken into account in Ukraine. This is, in fact, Putin's rather ambitious plan, which is no different from the capitulation of Ukraine.
On the streets of Moscow, the general opinion is that with Trump, a door has opened that was impossible under Biden.
Trump is a more reasonable person, more reasonable, pragmatic. And his entourage, and Elon Musk, and all of them, they are smart people.
There was no room for negotiation with Biden. He was hiding the truth and had his own personal interests in Ukraine.
In general, to be honest, I don't care. We will win. I don't care about America. I don't care about Europe.
Many Russians say they want to see an end to the war in Ukraine, and they see Trump's overtures as the channel to a peace agreement they hope will end not only the war, but also sanctions and Russia's isolation. For the VOA Moscow Bureau, Jonathan Spear, VOA News.
The United Nations Human Rights Chief is warning of the risk of a further escalation of the war in Sudan and says there is a growing risk of deaths from starvation on a wide scale. Volker Turk's warning came one day after the UN World Food Programme for the time being stopped distributing food aid in a famine-struck camp for displaced people in Sudan's North Darfur region amid escalating violence. Already famine conditions have been reported in at least 5 locations in Sudan, including displacement camps in Darfur, according to the UN. Turk notes that recent moves by the Rapid Support Forces towards establishing governing authority in areas it controls are likely to, quote, further entrench divisions and the risk of continued hostilities.
Sudan is a powder keg on the verge of a further explosion into chaos and at increasing risk of atrocity crimes and mass deaths from famine. Despite continued mediation efforts, Sudan is at a political stalemate while the bloodshed continues unabated. The danger of escalation has never been higher. Recent moves towards establishing a governing authority in areas under RSF control are likely to further entrench divisions and the risk of continued hostilities.
He also noted continued supplies of weapons to the warring parties from outside the country, including more advanced arms. For more on the dire situation in Sudan, I'm joined live by Khalid Mishain, a spokesperson of the Youth Citizen Observatory Network, an organization that monitors issues of concern across all states in Sudan. Khalid, welcome to Africa 54.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, as you heard, Human Rights Chief says there is a risk of death and starvation in your country. What has your organization seen on the ground?
I'm very sorry to tell you that we are seeing a very devastating and the worst ever situation in Sudan that's taking place now on the ground. Through our local observers that we have in Sudan, deployed in different areas controlled by the RSF and controlled by SAF, we are seeing a very bad situations that someone cannot tell about. It's there. The local observers report on the daily basis that we see hungry children, we see women, we see elderly there with no food, no water, as the escalating of the armed conflict is taking place everywhere, and the lack of the food and the health system. People are suffering. There is no food, there is no water. As we can see on the daily basis, how people gather in some villages and some areas, depending on one meal per day. You find a group of people gathering in one place, and this is happening daily through what locally we called here in Sudan as the emergency room are supplying this food. Right. But actually, it's the worst situation ever. We see death everywhere. The attack on the civilians by the both warring parties, by SAF and RSF, that we see on the daily basis. Civilians are attacked and there's no way to go. The aerial bombardment. Yes.
So in the past, and actually the recent past, we've had reports about the Rapid Support Forces, in particular, being accused of intentional genocide in Sudan. Do we know who they are targeting and why?
The Rapid Support Forces, we have seen that any village or area that the Rapid Support Forces take over, we see a targeting of civilians. There are many violations. This happens in Wadanura and Al Jazeera. It's happening in Jinena. when the Masalit were attacked and killed. So it's not, they are targeting the civilian everywhere. It happens in different areas. In Jazeera, it's happening in Khartoum. It happens, there's no specific people they are looking at, but everywhere they are, we see there is a violations based on these civilians.
And how would you characterize the worst impact of this war since it began on the country?
The worst impact up to now, it's very sorry to tell that. It's we have now a displacement of 20% of the populations, almost 12 million people. They are displaced now. This is the worst displacement in the recent time, because you can have a 20% of the population displacing, leaving the country, and also we have the continuous and the daily death of civilians by the warring parties, and the world is there watching them dying, and no one can take a decisive action toward protecting these civilians in Sudan.
I hope things change. Thank you so much, Khalid, for keeping us up to date with what's happening there. Khalid Mishan is a spokesperson for the Youth Citizen Observatory Network in Sudan. Still to come, remembering music icon Roberta Flack. We'll be right back.
With breathtaking landscape, diverse wildlife, ancient history, and spectacular safaris, a journey to Africa is an exciting and enriching experience. And while often not recognized, women play a significant role in shaping and driving Africa's tourism industry. On this week's edition of Our Voices, we will explore women's role in Africa's tourism industry and what should be done to give them equal opportunities, access to resources, and ownership. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, Namibian President Nangolo Bumba and Kovambo Nyoma, widow of the former President Sam Nyoma, who became Namibia's first democratically elected president, attended a memorial service for Sam Nyoma on Friday. His burial is slated for Saturday at Namibia's National Heroes Acre in the capital, Windhoek. Nyoma was 95 when he died. As Morocco's sheep herds dwindle at an alarming rate, King Mohammed VI is making a rare break with tradition by urging families to forego buying sheep to sacrifice during the upcoming Eid al-Adha. King Mohammed says the tradition could harm families with limited income because sheep have become so expensive due to minimal rainfall. Analysts say Russian propaganda and disinformation campaigns are key factors behind the departure of French troops from Chad and other countries in Africa's Sahel region. In this report from Jamena, Chad, Henry Wilkins takes a closer look at Russia's media strategies in the Sahel as French troops depart.
Chad's military, seen here in late January, is marking the departure of French troops from the country after more than 60 years. At the ceremony, Chadian President Mohamed Idriss Déby said the departure was a new dawn for a fully sovereign Chad. But analysts say a Russian propaganda campaign in the region played a key role in the French troops' departure.
Russia is leveraging this colonial history and anti-imperialist sentiment to fuel resentment among young Africans, public opinion, and even influencers against French interests and France's presence in the Sahel.
Chad is the latest of 4 countries in the Sahel, alongside Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, to have asked French troops to leave over the last 2 years. All have, at the same time, welcomed in Russian troops. Experts like Sambe say Russia uses a network of fake social media accounts to amplify anti-French narratives and spread conspiracy theories. Russia has also set up cultural institutes across the Sahel in the last 2 years. Behind me is the recently opened Russian House in N'Djamena, Chad's capital. For decades, Western countries have opened cultural institutes in African capitals to share their culture, to spread their language, and ultimately their soft power. But unlike other cultural institutes, investigative reporters say the Russian houses also train journalists who then go on to spread propaganda. Russia's embassy in Chad and the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs did not respond to requests for comment. But why is Russia so focused on the Sahel?
So through the disinformation campaigns, Russia's goal has been mostly to sow chaos in the region. And so Russia wants to come in and essentially replace states like France as the new primary partner for these salient states.
Sambe says,
c'est-à-dire que la démarche de la Russie, c'est justement pour dire aux Occidentaux et aux...
Russia's approach is to send a message to the West, particularly NATO countries like France, saying, if you create geopolitical problems for us in the Donbass or in Europe, we will retaliate in your sphere of influence, the Sahel. This essentially transposes the conflict onto Sahelian territory.
On the streets of N'Djamena, it's clear the public believes French troops leaving Chad is a positive step for the country.
We know that France does not come with any benefit to us, so it's not necessary for them to stay in our country. They should leave.
Since France's troops began leaving the Sahel in 2022, fatalities due to conflict in the region, mostly from clashes between state armies and jihadists, have gone up by 65%, according to data from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. Henry Wilkins, VOA News, N'Djamena.
It's time for Entertainment Report, and joining us now is Heather Maxwell, host of VOA's Music Time in Africa radio program with fond memories of a departed music icon. Hello, Heather.
Hello, Esther. This week we're saddened by the death of American music icon Roberta Flack. She passed away Monday in New York City at age 88. Miss Flack was a child prodigy. By age 19, she'd graduated from Howard University here in Washington, D.C., and then went on to bless America and the world with soulful, genre-bending ballads that are now in the DNA of popular music. Between 1969 and 2012, she recorded 23 albums. She toured the world many times, including stops in Ghana in 1971 and in South Africa in 1999. She won multiple major music awards, the last one being in 2020, where she was honored the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. It just so happens that she went to Howard University. She also got her professional start here in Washington in 1968.
Right down the street from VOA headquarters, when she was hired to perform regularly at Mr. Henry's Restaurant. If you can believe it, that restaurant is still open today, and live jazz continues to live and breathe and evolve. Every Wednesday night, in fact, the Capitol Hill Jazz Jam sessions happen, where the memory and spirit of Roberta Flack have never really faded. The sessions are run by musician Herb Scott, and I am on my way to meet him there to find out a little bit more about them and about Roberta's legacy as it plays out right here in our local community.
I am from Washington, D.C., and I learned the saxophone at an after-school program called the Sitar Center for the Arts. Shortly thereafter, I became a student at the Levine School of Music, but things really made a huge change for me when I became a student at Duke Ellington School for the Performing Arts, which opened a huge world of music and jazz and all of those wonderful things for me. Upon my senior year at Michigan State, the trumpeter Wynton Marsalis came to do a performance with the orchestra. And during a Q&A, I asked him, where do you think I should go when I finish college? Should I go to Europe? Should I go to Tokyo? Should I go to New York? And he said, I suggest you go back to where you're from and start a scene so musicians have places to play other than New York. and it was a profound statement, which I didn't really know what that meant or how to affect that. But I came back to DC with a renewed feeling that, okay, I need to figure out a way to pull my community together through jazz, through music, through art. And shortly thereafter, maybe about 10 years, maybe 5 or 10 years after coming back, I was able to start this jam session over here at Mr. Henry's. I didn't have a personal relationship with Roberta, unfortunately. The closest I probably got to Roberta was the 2 times that she stopped here at Mr. Henry's. I wasn't here though, so that was the only thing. She stopped in once before COVID, and then another time during COVID, where she spent more time hanging out with the staff and taking pictures and whatnot and checking out the space. But that was a missed opportunity on my part, so it's just been a musical relationship. I don't typically have a vocalist with me at the jam always, but tonight I invited vocalist Sequia Ulrich to kind of step in as our Roberta, and we're going to perform a few of her tunes, and that's just to kick off. I mean, she just passed so recently, I wanted to make sure we got right in there. Next Friday, we'll have an official Roberta Flack tribute concert, March 7th, at Mr. Henry's Restaurant, featuring myself and vocalist Imani Grace Cooper. And we'll play more of her songbook then.
Strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his words. Don't be scared to harmonize. Killing me softly with his song, killing me softly with his song, telling my whole life with his words, killing me softly with his song.
And that's our entertainment report for this week. Back to you, Esther.
Heather, thanks. Be sure to join VOA's entertainment reports every Friday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.